Assalamu alaikum. Assalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. One of the most effective ways to have people become true believers and truly submit to God is to penetrate their hearts with the truth, build their belief system and their Iman, and after that they will submit to God willingly, sincerely, and happily with all their hearts. This is exactly what the Messenger of God ﷺ did during his first 13 years of prophethood in Mecca, building people's beliefs one by one with patience and perseverance. Once their Iman and faith were built in their hearts, they were willing to do anything for the sake of God. They truly submitted to His will. Yesterday's enemies became today's friends and brothers in faith. After that, they were happily willing to surrender their lives and their possessions in God's cause and obeyed God's commands and worshipped Him with all sincerity. Hence, they well deserved the victories that followed, granted by Allah, of course. So instead of saying to that young man, Astaghfirullah, and asking him why he's not praying or fasting in Ramadan, or that young woman, why is she not wearing her headscarf or praying, you first educate and build their beliefs. Then the rest will take care of itself. They will obey God's commands willingly and sincerely. So the question is how? The first thing is to get to know Allah, the Creator, and His attributes. I mean, really getting to know Him. Then knowing Him is loving Him. One of the biggest passages in the Quran that captures the nature of God's unique attributes and the Islamic faith is in Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 255 through 257, which is also known as Ayat Kursi, which is the topic of our tafsir today. These verses summarize in powerful and concise words the basic principle of Islamic faith, citing those attributes of God that emphasize the meaning and significance of the basic Islamic principle of Tawheed, the oneness of God. That is the reason these verses in Ayat al-Kursi are highly recommended to be recited after every fard, wajib prayer, as a reminder of Tawheed and what does it mean to subscribe to it. Ayat al-Kursi is also one of the best healers of the heart. Of course, there are other verses in the Quran that accompany these verses in style and theme, because they also talk about oneness of God. Verses like قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ, Surah Al-Ikhlas, or هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ. These all have great significance due to the fact they explicitly talk about Tawheed. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. Allah, there is no deity but Him, the ever-living, the everlasting. Neither slumber nor sleep overtakes Him. To Him belongs all that is in the heavens and all that is on earth. Who is there that can intercede with Him except by His permission? He knows that which is in front of them and that which is behind them. while they encompass nothing of his knowledge except what he wills. His throne extends over the heavens and the earth, and the preservation of both does not tire him. He is the Most High, the Great, the Supreme in glory. Verse 255. Baqara, verse 255. 255. The beginning of the verse starts with Allah, who was accepted as the creator by all the idolaters and disbelievers at that time. As the Quran says in many places, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتُهُم مَّنْ خَلْقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهُ. If you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they would say, surely they would say Allah. Chapter 39, verse 38. Even Prophet's father's name was Abdullah. So they did believe and accept Allah as the creator. What they did not like or believe, what comes after Allah, which is La ilaha illa hu. There is no deity but him. No deities like the idols, the angels, or jinn, or certain people who were supposed to be close to God or godly, whom they worshipped, or even one's whims and desires. These all were and can be deities to people and come in all shapes and forms. Unfortunately, many people of the world today, especially the quote-unquote religious and those of some sects, are like that. They have many deities and follow them and don't really believe in La ilaha illa hu, as the Quran talks about them in another place. وَكَأَيًّا مِّنْ آيَةٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ عَنْهَا مُعْرِضُونَ وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُم بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. And how many signs in the heavens and on earth do they pass by and turn away from? And most of them do not believe in Allah without associating others as partners with him. Chapter 12, verses 105 and 106. It means they believe in Allah and other deities. These deities could be some statue representing a creation, could be a saint or a prophet. And now we have people that they think they worship Allah only and are his servants only, but in fact they are following their own whims and desires, be it material, power, wealth, etc., etc. And we've seen the verses. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ. Did you see the one who took his whims and desires as his deity? Chapter 25, verse 43. Does that mean he prostrates every day and worships his whims and desires? No. It means he has fully surrendered and submitted to his whims and desires. Any whisper from his desire, good or bad, he will follow it. Anytime any person who has surrendered to his desires, any desire, without questions asked, he has taken it as his deity. Then there are their so-called religious personalities, like clergies, priests, and monks, whom they take as their deities. These are what the above verse is referring to. Prophet Muhammad's fight, and in fact all prophets' fights, were over the fact they wanted people to worship Allah only and purely and abandon all other deities. But majority would not listen. In Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening, we pointed out the importance of clearly and fully appreciating the significance of God's attributes, sifat. The confusion before the advent of Islam was almost entirely due to misrepresentation and misinterpretation or distortion of God's position and attributes. Not until Islam had presented its clear view where the identity of God is distinguished from myth and superstition. The surah or the verse most clearly and unequivocally states, Allahu la ilaha illa hu. Allah, there is no deity but Him. This statement clearly and definitively distinguishes the Islamic concept of God from that of, for example, the Trinity, adopted and advanced by Christian Church Council long after Jesus, peace be upon him, and from the pagan beliefs of the ancient Egyptians who confused God with the sun and recognized the existence of lesser gods beside him. The statement says that all the false deities, whether man or things or powers in the universe, none have the power and authority over everything. In other words, the Quran says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْحَقُّ وَأَنَّ مَا يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ الْبَاطِلُ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْكَبِيرُ. That is because Allah is the only reality, and because whatever else they call upon besides Him is falsehood, and because Allah, He is the Most High, the Great. Chapter 31, verse 30. This clear and uncompromising concept is the foundation of Islamic belief and of the whole Islamic system of life. It defines the object of worship and submission for all, for every creation, so that man submits to none other than God, who alone should be worshipped, obeyed, and revered. It gives rise to the principle that God alone should be the source of law and legislation for human life on this earth. The laws and rules that people may lay down should derive from those of God's. This would in turn imply that values and concepts originate with God, and that all ethics, traditions, and moral systems must be judged in relation to them. The verse describes God as Al-Hayyul Qayyum, the ever-living, the everlasting. You could in fact say Al-Hayyul Qayyum is the reason that there's no deity but Him, because the real deity must always be alive and present. Unlike these idols man has created himself that come and go. Al-Hayyul Qayyum implies a self-generating, self-sustaining, self-subsisting being that is unique and independent of everything else. It is also a being without a beginning or an end, totally outside the dimension of time, which defines the beginning and the end of all the transient things, transient beings. Furthermore, this being, God Almighty, is absolute and cannot be defined in conventional terms applicable to all creation. He is unique in every respect, and nothing can be compared with Him. Thus, all other definitions or representations of God conjured up by the human mind throughout the ages are inadequate. The everlasting, ever-living, eternal implies that God has power over all things and that He is supreme and ultimate cause. He is the source of life, without whom there can be no existence. there can be no life. This is completely opposite to the misguided view of Aristotle, the most eminent Greek philosopher, who said, God takes no interest in his creation because he is too great to preoccupy himself with anything else. This is what Aristotle said. Aristotle took this to be as glorification of God, but in effect it means the elimination of God from the daily affairs of the world he created. A hands-off God, if you will. The Islamic view of God, on the other hand, is a positive one, based on the principle that God is actively and constantly sustaining and supervising all existence, and that the existence of everything emanates from his will and design. The Islamic view of God gives total assurance and relates a Muslim's conscience, as well as everything around him, directly to God, the power that controls all existence according to the divine scheme and order. A believer, hence, draws all his values, norms, and standards from God's order and watches God in all his actions and behaviors. لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. Neither slumber nor sleep overtakes him. This statement reinforces in simpler and more graphic terms the preceding one, that God is the everlasting power sustaining everything in existence. It also distinguishes God from other beings by pointing out that he is not affected by sleep to any degree, in any shape or form. Senatun means slumber or dozing off, as we say, which is something that happens before we sleep. During the slumber or sleep, we are unaware or careless of our surroundings. The verse refers to the fact that Allah is always aware and supervising everything. Ta'khuduhu, translated as overtaken, means unlike us, the humans, and other creations who get tired and sleepy and sleep overtakes us and we need it, Allah does not get tired. Sleep does not overtake him, and he has no needs. God is unique being, and his total and absolute control over all things, large and small, at all times are awesome concept to comprehend. No matter how much the limited human mind can, may be able to grasp the size and variety of creatures and events of this whole vast universe, it would not be possible for man to adequately perceive how God exercises his power and control over the world. What we're able to appreciate is bound to fill us with amazement and also give us endless reassurance of God's presence and protection over us. لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. To him belongs all that is in the heavens and all that is on earth. This means God's ownership and sovereignty is absolute, unconditional, irrefutable, and encompassing everything. Unlike ownership that man has, which is limited and temporary. This is another aspect of the principle of God's oneness, which confirms that God is supreme, ever-present, eternal, master and owner of all. It completely invalidates the assumption that God has partners in his power or actions. This concept gives a new definition of ownership as applied to individual human human beings. For since God is the ultimate owner of all that exists, no one else can claim ownership of anything in this world. People are, therefore, mere custodians of what they possess, or just leasing that which is entrusted to them by God. Accordingly, they are bound by the terms of that custodianship or lease, as said by God Almighty, the ultimate owner. Any violation of these terms leads to disqualification of the trustee. And eventually people leave everything they have behind when they die, as the lease expires, and only their deeds go with them. Here we can see how Islamic principles are directly translated into law for immediate application in life. When God says to him belongs all that is in the heavens and all that is on earth, and once the belief is firmly established in our consciousness that everything in this world belongs to God and that what we own is merely on loan for a limited period of time, guess what? Greed and lust to accumulate wealth and worldly possessions by any means will not be difficult to control. This belief is bound to fill our hearts with contentment, humility, tolerance, and generosity. One will face wealth and poverty with equal ease and steadfastness, and if impoverished, will not be bitter or hold grudges. من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه. Who is there that can intercede with him except by his permission? Means no one can control or affect God's decision and God's judgment on someone's deed. No one can change God's reaction, God's mind and will on his judgment of someone's deed and rescue him from God's hands of justice. Allah is the most merciful, and if someone deserves his forgiveness, he will do so without anyone's intervention. This statement underlines yet another aspect of the concept of God's oneness, distinguishing clearly the Supreme Being and his creation. Above all, they are not to intercede, make shafa'ah on behalf of anyone without God's permission. And when they are granted such permission, they will act within its limits, as set out by God Almighty. You see, the whole concept of intercession, shafa'ah, is often misunderstood to mean those who are close to Allah, like for example Anbiya and Awliya, intercede on behalf of some individuals and ask for God's forgiveness. What this form of understanding implies is that Anbiya and Awliya can change God's mind, affect his decision. Even worse, it implies these Anbiya and Awliya have greater mercy than Allah does. They are more compassionate than Allah, and can even interfere with his judgment and justice. What this verse is saying is that nothing happens without Allah's permission. He forgives first, and these Anbiya and Awliya may be delivering or executing the news to the individual. In other words, when God deems an individual to be deserving and qualified for his mercy and forgiveness for some of his misdeeds, he would allow the intercession. The term بِإِذْنِهِ, his permission, does not mean that Allah allows others to affect his decision. But whenever he wills, he decides to reduce or eliminate one's punishment, then allows intercession, which is nothing but giving the good news to that individual or executing his mercy and forgiveness by these special people like the Anbiya and Awliya. Before that, person is ready to intercede for you. When that person is ready to intercede for you, Allah has already forgiven you. Hence, gives permission for intercession. I hope this is clear. The tone of the statement is one of divine majesty and authority, enhanced by its rhetorical form, which seems to question the legitimacy of the notion that how anyone can intercede on behalf of another without God's permission and authority. Allah says in Quran, يَوْمَ لَا يُغْنِي مَوْلًا عَنْ مَوْلًا شَيْئًا وَلَا هُمْ يُنْصَرُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ اللَّهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. A day when no friend or protector or Mawla can avail or help a friend, nor can they be helped, except those on whom Allah will have mercy. Indeed, He is the Almighty, the Most Merciful. Chapter 44, verses 41 and 42. Moving on with the verse, يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء. He knows that which is in front of them and that which is behind them, while they encompass nothing of His knowledge except what He wills. This statement expresses God's full and total knowledge of the present, the past, and the future, which human beings cannot possibly know or perceive. He is aware of all their situations. He is ever aware of what human beings know and what they do not and will not know. He knows of them what is apparent and what is hidden. They can learn only what Allah allows them to learn. None gets ahead of His knowledge. The fact that God knows our present and past and future deeds and beyond should really, really fill us with dread and awe for being totally and permanently exposed before Him. We are exposed before Him. It inspires total humility and submission to the one all-knowing God. It is also touching to reflect on the outcome of this principle, that they encompass nothing of His knowledge except what He wills. It is humbling. You see, human beings may learn only what God wills them to know and learn, which in an age of such tremendous advancement of scientific knowledge and technology is a compelling truth to think about. God alone possesses full and absolute knowledge of all existence. He's able, in His infinite wisdom, to impart whatever He chooses of His knowledge to mankind, as He has promised. سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. We will soon show them our signs in all the horizons and in themselves until they clearly see that this is the truth. Chapter 41, verse 53. Man receives that which God allows him to receive through His inspirations and His natural laws that are explored and discovered by man every day. This fact is often forgotten, and so is the fact that whatever knowledge God imparts to man, whether relating to the physical or the metaphysical world, entails a certain degree of responsibility and accountability. In other words, the more knowledge you have, the closer you should get to God. Despite this, man often forgets that God is the source of knowledge he has acquired. The knowledge that he has acquired, God is the source of it. While others deny the fact altogether, God has been giving man knowledge ever since the day he appointed man as a custodian on earth and undertook to guide him and show him the way forward, unfolding before him the secrets of the physical world and all the principles, laws, and tools that facilitate human life and progress on earth. While God has generously enabled man to acquire vast amount of knowledge and made him privy to many of the world's mysteries, you see, he has withheld many others. These are not required for man to know in order to fulfill his role on earth. These include the secret of life, which continues to elude human knowledge and which man continues to pursue, but with little success. The same applies to knowledge of the future, which remains hidden behind an, unpenetrable wall, despite man's persistent efforts to predict and determine the future. Occasionally, however, with God's permission, certain individuals are often given a glimpse of the future. Just a glimpse. Nevertheless, man is captivated and overwhelmed by the little knowledge he has acquired, which he owes to God's grace and generosity, and has assumed for himself a quasi-divine status or demigod, denying the very existence of God, the Creator. In recent decades, scientists have begun to show a certain degree of humility in recognizing the inadequacy and shortcomings of human knowledge. There are, however, many fools who continue to think that they know everything there is to know. وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. His throne extends over the heavens and the earth, and the preservation of both does not tire him, weary him. He is the Most High, the Great. Here we have another example of the unique style of the Quran in expressing an abstract idea by means of a visual image in order to make the meaning clear. The word kursi, meaning seat or chair, and translated here as throne, is usually used to denote sovereignty. The idea here is that God's sovereignty and authority extends over the entire universe. And the image makes it clear, easy to grasp and comprehend. You might also call his throne as his kingdom or his command center. He owns the throne for this whole kingdom. We already use this expression when we say, for example, so-and-so king took over the throne or the seat. It does not mean literally he took a chair and sat on it. It means he took over the power. This is where the name Ayat al-Kursi is taken from, which is one of the most important verses in the Quran, because the central aspect of Islamic teaching, which is Tawheed, is discussed in this verse. Likewise, the phrase وَلَا يَؤُودُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا, the preservation of both, means heavens and earth, does not weary him, does not tire him. It's an expression of God's omnipotence, presenting in simple but powerful terms how easy it is for God to sustain, guard, and preserve the heavens and the earth. Guarding all that is in the heavens and on the earth does not burden him. The verse ends with two more attributes of God. وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. All the above mentioned facts because he is the Most High, the Great, exalting God above all else. The Arabic word makes it clear that these attributes are exclusive to God Almighty. The term Aliyu, which is from Ulov, meaning highest position, and Azim, the greatest of all. No human being or any other creature could aspire to these qualities, and those who try shall be humbled and disgraced. Elsewhere in the Quran, using the term Ulov, Allah says, تِلْكَ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ نَجْعَلُهَا لِلَّذِينَ لَا يُرِيدُونَ عُلُوًّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فَسَادًا وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. As for the happy life to come, we grant this happy life, we grant it exclusively to those who seek neither to exalt themselves on earth, nor yet to spread corruption. So the term Ulov is used in this verse as well. No matter how powerful or great a human being may grow, he can never rise above being a true servant of God. Once this fact is firmly established in man's mind, it will enhance his status as the one serving God and restrain his pride and transgression. He will truly fear God and appreciate his majesty and power, and will seek to be more humble toward God and less arrogant in dealing with his fellow human beings. Here again, we see how a tenet of faith is immediately translated into a code of conduct in real life. This is the beauty of Islam. Now, in the next verse, the freedom of religion is guaranteed. And, we may stop, when we're talking about this part of the verse, because, we want to pause a little bit and explain a little more. It may take a little more time, but it's worth it. So having outlined some of the most essential and detailed aspects of faith, and having precisely defined the status of God and the nature of his relationship with the rest of creation, the next verses go on to describe the proper behavior of the believers as they adopt this faith and pass it on to the others and assume the leadership of mankind. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. الله ولي الذين آمنوا يخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور والذين كفروا أولياءهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. There is no compulsion in religion. The right way is hence distinct from error. The right way stands clear from the wrong way. He who rejects false deities and believes in Allah has indeed taken hold of a most firm rope support that never breaks. Allah hears all and knows all. Allah is the protecting guardian of the believers. He leads them out of depths of darkness into the light. As for the unbelievers, their patrons are false deities who lead them out of light into depths of darkness. Those are the ones destined for the fire. Therein dwell forever. Verses 256 and 257. La ikraha fi din. This is a form of what we call nafy that does nahy. Nafy that does nahy. Or a form of negation that prohibits. To mean, do not force religion on anyone. That's simply what it means. Do not force religion on anyone. We have another verse that explains La ikraha fi din in the Quran. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَآمَنَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كُلُّهُمْ جَمِيعًا أَفَأَنْتَ تُكْرِهُ النَّاسَ حَتَّى يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. And if your Lord willed, all who are on earth would have believed together. Would you, O Muhammad, compel people, force people until they become believers? Chapter 10, verse 99. So, what were the wars for? All the battles, the ones Messenger of God alayhi salam and Muslims engaged in. Were they fought to force idolaters to convert? Well, if that was the case, then their action contradicts the above two verses in the Quran that we just recited. So, then what is the answer? They fought those battles not to convert people, rather to defend their lives, their possessions, and preservation of their faith, the right to practice their faith and to gain freedom in expressing their faith and inviting to it. They fought because their enemies would not cease their hostility, their torture, their determination to wipe out Muslims as they reneged their peace treaties. They would not leave Muslims alone, even after they were forced to migrate to Medina. As we have said before, God does not want people to believe by force, rather by choice. And that is why in above verse it says, and if your Lord willed, all who are on earth would have believed together. That would have been by jabr, by force. But he didn't want that. Islam looks at faith as a matter of conviction. Once the basic facts are provided and explained. Faith is never a matter of coercion or force. To achieve this conviction, Islam addresses the human being in totality. It addresses the human mind and intellect. It engages them. It engages human common sense, emotions, and feelings, and the whole human conscious. It does not resort to coercion. By the same token, Islam never seeks to convert people through force or threat or pressure of any kind. It deploys facts, reasoning, explanation, and persuasion. Also, nowhere in the Quran do we find a verse that advocates engaging in a war for the purpose of converting people to Islam, nor ceasing a war with the condition that they convert to Islam. There are verses about having people hear the word of God, which is considered part of an invitation, da'wah, to the Islamic faith. In contrast, we find that Christianity, was imposed by force after Constantine, the Roman emperor, made Christianity the official religion throughout his empire. And he adopted the same brutal means his predecessor had used against Christian minorities. Islam came to declare and establish the great universal principle that لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. There is no compulsion in religion. The right way is hence distinct from error. Here it says the Supreme Being, God, Supreme Being, described in the last verse. He wants people to believe in Him and His religion based on free will, not by force. And gives the reason, which is, and that this has a reason, and that is the right way is clearly shown and is distinct from the wrong way, from error. Therefore, a sensible person, a person of intellect who is fair-minded, will have no problem distinguishing the right way from error, from the wrong way. Coercion and force belong to those who have needs, and Allah has no needs. He does not need you and I to believe in Him, and our belief does not add or take away anything from Him. It is always the dictators who are in need of people and always force people to follow them. God, on the other hand, wants people to choose to be a believer, a Muslim by choice, with his heart and sincerity, not by force. Forcing someone to embrace any faith will result in hypocrites and never works. Muslims fought and condemned hypocrites. I may force you to accept Islam through beating, torture, and jail time, and you may accept on the surface, but in your heart you would be cursing me. Is this how we want people to embrace Islam? Furthermore, قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ. Also because the right way is distinct from error. The right way is clearly shown and is distinct from the wrong way. So if you're fair-minded, you will accept it because it makes sense. It's logical. Hence, you should leave people free to choose. You know, freedom of belief is the most basic right that identifies man as a human being. To deny anyone his right, this right, is to deny him or her humanity. As I've said in my book, faith and freedom go together. One cannot separate one from the other. And in fact, there can be no real faith without genuine freedom. Faith is a matter of conviction, and conviction cannot be imposed with force. It can be acquired only by exercising one's freedom. This is why the Quran stresses the importance of freedom of faith. Freedom of belief also implies the freedom to express and propagate one's belief without fear of threat or persecution. Otherwise, the freedom is hollow. That freedom is hollow and meaningless. Islam undoubtedly has the most enlightened view of life and the world, as it teaches its followers before anything else, anyone else, that they are forbidden to compel others to embrace Islam. Now, in parentheses, we should elaborate on the statement, there shall be no compulsion in religion. There shall be no compulsion in religion. So the elaboration is this. When we say there shall be no compulsion in religion, raises the question of whether this principle can be reconciled with the obligatory duty of jihad, or taking up arms for the defense and protection of the faith, which Islam has openly advocated in the Quran. Yes, Quran has in many verses talked about given permission to fight in order to defend against Muslims' faith or freedom of religious expression, Muslims' lives and possessions. The term mostly used in this context is, by the way, qital, not jihad. However, jihad can also be a physical fight, although it is mostly non-combative struggle and strive for betterment of individuals and society. For example, strive to educate. When it comes to physical battles, all wars in Islam are defensive, as we spoke about the reason earlier. All those reasons that I mentioned. And as we see in verses like, for example, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. Fight those who come to fight you. Chapter 2, verse 190. Or وَلَا يَزَالُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ حَتَّى يَرُدُّوكُمْ عَنْ دِينِكُمْ إِنْ اسْتَطَاعُوا. They will not cease fighting you until they turn you back from your faith, if they can. Chapter 2, verse 217. أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. Permission is given to those who fight because they were wronged. Chapter 22, verse 39. And there are many more. There is no denying that throughout its long history, Islam has advocated physical fights not to impose its doctrine, its faith, but to guarantee certain objectives that are necessary for human prosperity. Islam advocates qital or jihad in its physical sense to protect its followers against attacks and threats and to ensure their security and freedom. Islam considers religious persecution and any threat to religion more dangerous for the existence of Islam than actual war. According to this great Islamic principle, the survival and prosperity of the faith takes precedent over the preservation of human life itself. Islam justifies the defense and protection of life and possessions and allows even greater justification for the use of force in defense of the faith. Muslims have been the great, Muslims have been the, as you know, the history, over 1400 years, they have been the target of religious persecutions on many, many occasions and in various parts of the world. In Spain, they, together with some non-Catholic Christians, suffered waves of genocide and brutality, wiping them out of the part of Europe altogether, that part which was in the Spain area. In Jerusalem and its surroundings, Muslims were the target of relentless crusader campaigns designed to uproot Islam and destroy the Muslims. The Muslims resisted and fought and prevailed in the name of Islam, sparing their land and people, But you see, and this has been happening over time periods, and today Muslims continue to be the target of religious persecution under a host of Christian, Buddhist, Zionist, and secular regimes in many parts of the world. This situation makes jihad an incumbent duty on Muslims. This form of jihad could start with education for public awareness, campaigning for public awareness, forming coalitions, appealing to Muslim governments as well as non-Muslim governments, protesting, and then possible physical battle. As a fundamental rule, Islamic principles are based on peace and justice. I repeat, as a fundamental rule, a general rule, not exception, but general rule, Islamic principles are based on peace and justice. Islam is at peace with the peaceful. Islam advocates peace and calls on all nations to be peaceful regardless of their faith. Advocating peace means Islam and its followers stand for peace and justice. At the same time, Muslims should be ready to stand up against injustice, corruption, and destruction. Now, back to the verse. The surah elaborates the theme further, saying, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. He who rejects false deities and believes in God has indeed taken hold of the most firm rope support that never breaks. It is false deities that must be rejected, while faith must be reserved for God, who alone deserves faith and trust. The Arabic term for false deities is taghut, meaning tyranny. Tyranny, or a word denoting anything to anyone that takes a hold of the mind or suppresses the truth or transgresses the laws and limits set by God. It refers to forces and systems that disregard the religious, moral, social, and legal order and operate in this life on values and principles not allowed by God or not derived from His guidance and teachings. That is the definition of taghut. The verse talks about a person who rejects and resists such taghut deities in all shapes and forms by believing in God's oneness, which is the only certain path to success and salvation. وَيُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى. The surah explains that faith in God provides the believer with a strong and unshakable support, a strong rope that guarantees him certain liberation. In its essence, faith is a recognition of the most fundamental truth, which is the existence of God, upon which all reality stands, and acknowledgement of the laws God has laid down for the world and the laws by which the world exists and operates. Believers who hold to God's guidance are assured of never drifting away from God's path or losing their way. Wallahu sami'un alim. God hears all and knows all. He hears what is uttered and knows what is in people's inner souls. Those who believe in God will never be denied justice or be disappointed. The surah then goes on to present a vivid and graphic scene depicting the two paths of guidance and error. Allahu waliyyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur والذين كفروا أولياءهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات. Allah is the protector of those who have faith. He will lead them into light from the depths of darkness. As for the unbelievers, their patrons are false deities who lead them out of light into darkness. Those are the people destined for the fire therein to abide. The verse shows how God kindly and gently takes the believers by the hand and leads them out of the darkness into the light, and how the false deities sponsor the unbelievers and lead them also by the hand, but out of the light into the depths of darkness. It is fascinating and inspiring scene, full of life and imagination, and far more eloquent and effective. The Quranic style is not only very articulate and beautiful, it is also precise as it describes, you see, faith and belief in a singular term as a nur, the light, and describes disbelief as dhulumat, depths of darkness, in the plural form. Same for the believers. Allah is wali, the only protector, singular. But for the unbelievers, at-taghut, false deities, the term awliya, The patrons, or plural, is also used. This is a brief but profound and enduring statement. Faith gives the believer a clear vision, a steady and confident understanding that enables him to identify, discern, and choose. It lights up his path to Allah, His laws, and His teachings, putting man in perfect peace with the world around him. He proceeds through life in total harmony, free of all conflict and at peace with his human nature. The light of faith and truth is one and unique, leading to the one straight path, while darkness, in the sense of evil, can take various shapes and forms. There is darkness in uncontrolled desires, another darkness in deviation, conceit, and tyranny, dhulm. And yet, there is another darkness in blind submission, in pretension and hypocrisy, as well as greed and cynicism and skepticism. All these forms of darkness stem from the evil of abandoning Allah's rope of guidance and submitting to powers and laws other than His. Leaving the light that radiates from God plunges man into darkness and misery. And the ultimate end is even worse, which is being among those destined for the hellfire in permanent stay. In conclusion, belief in Allah is the right path man should seek and follow, and denial of His existence and sovereignty is the path of error that man should avoid and guard against. Belief in God is indeed a blessing, a privilege. It gives the human mind a clear view of the world around him and gives the heart peace and assurance. It sets for man higher goals and noble concerns and aspirations, and for society as a whole, a sound system of values and ideals that improve the quality of life. I urge myself first and everyone else to understand these verses we spoke about today, memorize them, and recite them after every prayer and other occasions as well, not just for its rewards, but as a reminder for us who our Creator, our Rabb, is, and to implement these verses in our daily lives, inshallah. We ask Allah to help us get to know Him better and love Him more each and every day. We ask Allah to purify our hearts and our Iman and cleanse our hearts and mind from any shirk and arrogance. We ask Allah to make us among those who firmly hold on to His rope, His support, so He can take us to the guiding light and never follow the taghut of our time. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. والسلام على من اتبع الهدى.